Is this your uncle?
Yes, that was Okey Dean. When I knew him, I was just a 10-year-old boy. And I always enjoyed Okey because whenever he'd come to visit, he treated me more like an adult than a kid. So later on, I wanted to do some research on his war experiences. And that's why I'm doing this video now. So here is a video on Okey Dean.
I grew up in Oklahoma on a farm where we had to walk quite a few miles to our school. We had some hard times, but we had a close family life. On the farm, we planted mainly cotton, but at times we even planted watermelon. All of us kids had chores to do on the farm, regardless of our size. We loved the life there in central Oklahoma. Then the sandstorms came. Oklahoma was a great place to live before the sandstorms came. The storms came out like snow blizzards, where the sky was blacked out. We tried to last through the storms, but finally our wells dried up and we had to sell the farm and move. We were going to move to Arizona, but we ended up in San Luis Valley in Colorado instead. Okey Dean, 1936.
Okey was born in Oklahoma. Of course, we grew up there. But when we left Oklahoma, we had 3 water wells on the farm. They all 3 went dry. It was during the Dust Bowl. And then we moved out here in 36. I think about July the 17th, I think, 1936. We was on our way to Arizona, and we come out here to see one of Dad's sisters that lived here. And Dad decided he liked it here, so we just stayed. Then us kids then went to school at Sargent. Of course, we rode the bus then.
I hated to have to move from Oklahoma, but still, life has been pretty good to me in Colorado. I work on the farm with my dad and my brothers. I have made enough money to buy a nice car. I have also been able to get training as an automobile mechanic. I have a lot of friends and family here, so it seems like it has always been my home. My only concern is this Hitler over there in Europe that is trying to take over all these countries. I hope we don't have to get involved in that conflict. Okey Dean, 1940.
We'll recall as into line we fall the thing that happened on Hawaii shore.
December 7th, 1941, the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor at Hawaii, and America is now at war.
Well, we are in the war. I joined up with the 87th Mountain Regiment in Fort Lewis, Washington. This is the same outfit my brother, Chet, is in. He joined up last year. We will eventually be back in Colorado, as they are building a new camp for us near Leadville, Colorado, and we will be close to home there. Okey Dean, February 1942.
In April of 1942, work started on Camp Hale, which was located near Leadville, Colorado. In November of 1942, the 86th and 87th Infantries were transferred to Camp Hale in Colorado.
Well, we are in Colorado at our new camp. It is near Leadville, Colorado, and is called Camp Hale. I am also able to get some leave to travel to Monte Vista. Dolly Meade and I will be getting married during this time in Monte. She also may be able to come to Leadville area when I get a weekend pass. Okey Dean, April 1943.
July 15th, 1943,
10th Mountain Division was created from the 85th, 86th, and 87th Mountain Regiment. The 10th Mountain Division is unique, a collection of outdoorsmen who love the mountains. What began as an experimental program soon grew into one of the finest fighting forces in World War II. This division would comprise of mountain skiers and men from the farms who understood the horses and mules. The purpose of the force would be mountain fighting, and the troops would be trained in skiing, mountain climbing, archery, and small arms weapons. To support the troops, supplies and ammunition would be brought in with motorized vehicles when possible, but mainly with the use of mules.
They just made our group the 10th Mountain Division. I am in the 87th Regiment, which used to be the 87th Infantry. I am glad to be staying in the 87th. They have a bunch of great guys here, and we are proud to be in the 10th Mountain Division now. Okey Dean, 1943.
I'll tell you a story that's very true of a swimming mountain crew. We'll shoot Sandy Canyon without a spill, and you'll find us sprung over the hill. The road to Japan is a downhill course, Berlin in a couple of weeks. The 87th best by far, the wind is goddamn warm. The Army skiers best by far, you'll win you under the bar. The roughest, the toughest, we're dirty and mean, hungry and lean, but our rifles are clean. We'll fight to the finish, we'll shoot any hill, by infantry drill. The 87th best by far, will win this goddamn war. The 87th best by far, will win this goddamn war.
1943 had some more surprises for us. Towards the end of the year, we were shipped off to Fort Ord, California for training in hand-to-hand combat with knives and machetes. The Marines are our instructors, and they are good. The Scuttlebutt is where we are going to be shipped out to the Pacific to fight the Japanese. Well, we got on our ship, and when we got off, we were not in the Pacific. It ends up we're in Kiska, Alaska. There are supposed to be Japanese in these islands up here. We spent months here, and there were no Japanese. Seems like they had slipped out before we got here. Maybe they heard we were coming and were afraid of us. Well, we don't know what we will be doing now. Some of the guys were shipped off to the Pacific, but now I am back in Camp Hale, Colorado, and glad to be back. Except there is just more training for us to go through. I don't know what is going to happen with us in this war. It seems like we should be getting over there pretty soon. Okey Dean, November 1943.
D Series, the 10th Mountain Division's exercises. These exercises are held in the surrounding mountains. Sunday, March 26, 1944. 12,000 men of the 10th would climb to over 13,000 feet in one of the worst blizzards in Colorado's history. Over 8 feet of new snow had fallen and more was coming down. Temperatures dropped to over 30 degrees below zero with high winds. Visibility was low, and it was difficult for the men and equipment to get through. The men would encounter 6 weeks of these exercises, and they were not allowed to build fires. At times, the sun would come out and melt the snow around the troops. Then temperatures would drop again and freeze the clothing on the men. In one day alone, over 100 men had to be evacuated for frostbite. Many of the local hospitals were filled with GIs. The troops were glad when the exercises were over, but they realized how important they were for their training when they got into battle.
I don't know if we are ever going to get into the war. It seems like all we do is train. We were freezing our butts off at Camp Hale, and now we have to be transferred to Camp Swift in Texas. Maybe they were just trying to thaw us out. Okey Dean, June 1944.
In Italy, the Germans had been pushed back from the southern part to the northern mountains of Italy, into the Apennine Mountains, where they entrenched themselves. The Fifth Army had repeatedly been pushed back from removing them from the mountains. This was going to be a job for the 10th Mountain Division.
Now it's December, and we have received new orders to be shipped out. It looks like we are going to be overseas, but they won't tell us where. It will be the first part of January 1945, and I'm able to get some leave to go home and visit my family during Christmas time. Okey Dean, December 1944.
I remember Christmas Eve in 1944. We were living in Monte Vista, and usually we went out to the Grandpa and Grandma Mead's house for Christmas Eve. But this year we stayed in Monte Vista. The reason we did is that early spring of 1944, Dad had went to Arizona and he worked quite a bit in the fruit industry there and made quite a bit of money. And we were getting ready to buy a house on Dunham Street, and we were staying in this house at the time there in Monte before we were moving in. So I can picture us being in this house, and I know it's this house because we moved around a lot. We never stayed in one house more than 6 months, I don't believe. And I can picture them in this one room when they came in. Now there is a disagreement on this, because you look at the 10th history, they say the 10th Division went from Fort Swift straight to New Jersey to be shipped overseas. And the records do not show Okey getting leave, but the records weren't always correct on what I saw. And looking back at history, the 86th Division went directly to New Jersey and then went overseas. And the 85th and 87th went over later. So I'm sure that Okey got leave, and I saw him in December of 1944. And before Dolly died, I'd been doing a research on the booklet for him, and I asked Dolly about this question of him being there Christmas Eve in 1944, and she said yes, he was. So I am 99% sure that I saw Okey on Christmas Eve in 1944 and not Christmas Eve of another year.
Well, my Christmas leave was short, but I sure enjoyed it. I was able to visit with a lot of the family and friends while I was here. Now I have to leave so I can get back to my company in the 10th. Okey Dean, Christmas 1944.
I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer.
We are on the ship and heading out. They haven't told us where we are going yet, But with us leaving the New York harbor, it must be Europe. Okey Dean, January 1945.
Yes, it was Europe. The ship docked at Naples, Italy in January of 1945, and here the men of the tent saw the results of the war-torn Italy. From here they were shipped up to Pisa, Italy, and from there they started their march to the battlefront. The Fifth Army had been stopped from gaining the mountain high points that separated German-held northern Italy. The Germans occupied Riva Ridge and was able to direct fire down on any invasion attempt by our forces. Riva Ridge was 2,000 sheer feet of rock, with the Germans entrenched on top. General Prescott of the Fifth Army was sure no one could penetrate this German stronghold, but General Hayes of the 10th Division persuaded him to give the 10th a chance. To get to the top, the 10th would have to scale this very steep rock formation. 5 possible routes were located, and the mountain climbers started at dark using picks and ropes. It was a long, tedious night, but at 5 o'clock the following morning they reached the top and were able to surprise the sleeping Germans. This allowed for U.S. troop movement below the ridge without being bombarded from above. Still, the German troop concentration was so intense along this area, our troops had to sneak in during dark to get into position for our push towards the Po Valley. While this nation is focused on President Roosevelt, the war is still going on in Asia and Europe. In Europe, the German forces are pinned in a vice within their own country. Combined forces of the U.S. 1st and 3rd Armies advancing 58 miles in the Great Drive to cut Germany in half, yesterday reached the suburbs of Leipzig and began outflanking Berlin on the south. Meanwhile, the 9th Army is within 45 miles of Berlin, and the Russians are on the Berlin outskirts from the north. The once mighty Nazi German army is mighty no more. In America, there is constant talk about the war being over. You see it in the newsreels, and even the soldiers hear it on the radio. Americans are tired of war and want it over. What they don't see is the soldiers that are still out there on the front lines. They are fighting deadly battles for their lives. For the men who live and fight on, the war is not over. For them, the war begins every day.
We have been skirmishing with the Germans for the last few weeks, but now the big battle to get these hills away from the German is about to begin, and the German will hold up in the houses and bunkers. Okey Dean, April 1945.
The big battle for the Po Valley began April 14, 1945. Our troops had to fight literally inch by inch against the Germans that were holed up in buildings and bunkers. The Germans had mined all of these areas, and snipers were positioned in the houses. These were elite German troops that were prepared to die rather than surrender. There is no way you know the feelings of our GIs that were killed during the fierce fighting on this day of battle. On this day alone, the 85th and 87th regiments suffered over 500 casualties. This much I do know. Okey Dean acted in the same manner of which I knew him. His last act was of concern and compassion for someone else.